How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, my free channel where I platform my understandings of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression in China from 1931 to 1945. And today we're back at Zhenjiang County, and we're going to have a look at how the Saya detachment went in yesterday's game against the 124th Division of Sun Zhen's 22nd Army Group. Now, I'm using a different camera today, a different mount stand, so we'll just see how my handheld goes. But this is a battlefield, and if you remember, we're looking at Saya's advance towards Zhenjiang Town and the defense of the 22nd Army Group. And this is the this year I said I wasn't going to do a campaign, but this has turned out into being a campaign. And instead of a campaign about a glorious or a brilliantly trained unit or a brilliantly led unit, we've had to look at a very obscure, very ridiculed and contemptible little army. Until that is history and the fighting that went on proved us different. And we're never going to look at the 22nd Army Group again, or Sichuan provincial armies, in the same way. Because just as at Yangquan, where we saw the forces hold for 10 days before they had to accept defeat and the Japanese captured the town. Then we looked at how this army group has not been wanted ever. Nobody wanted it. Nobody sent it any supplies, and it was so badly. It was so hungry and in need that it plundered a war zone's supply depot. And in disgrace, only Zhen Gren, commander of the 5th Army, 5th War Zone, accepted them. And we saw their first encounter, the Red Spear night attack. We saw the 22nd Army Group again. Wasn't scared of a fight, and was willing to sacrifice itself in order to kill the Japanese. The next game, we looked at the Sun Zhen's first line of defense, which the Japanese Saya detachment attacked the center of, and we saw how that held for 10 days, which led Sun Zhen to lead his own division, the 124th, in a kind of a different approach to this battle. Because remember, Sun Zhen had his forces had been trying to hold Yangquan, and even though it wasn't against such a strong Japanese army, and they were in a wall defensive position, it had been a hopeless fight. He's seen that even at the raid, the Red Spear raid. He'd seen that it took a lot of blood to even break into the Japanese lines. So attack was out of the question too. So Sun Zhen, I believe, he looked at his old days of fighting before he faced the Japanese, and he set up his armies differently. Now let's have a look at what the Japanese always do. Japanese, always pretty much the same. Like to set up their field guns in advance with their observers nearby, so that as the advance continues, the guns do not need to be moved until later in the day. So bearing this in mind and remembering that the Saya detachment has over 100 pieces of artillery from 75mm up to 150mm, Sun Zhen changed his tactics. Now, the Japanese attacked with one battalion up the railroad with armour and armoured cars and a bulldozer in support, and they attacked on the Chinese right with one battalion to take the first position and outflank the Chinese defense, perhaps coming through here. But Sun Zhen never set up his troops so that the Japanese could see them. The first time the Japanese would have seen Sun Zhen's troops is when when Sun Zhen's troops opened fire, because at the beginning of the game, Japanese artillery observers failed to spot any Chinese positions, and that was because they were all on the reserve slope here. Now here I took 2 companies of Chinese infantry and put 2 medium machine guns, one with each company, and 2 minefields in front of the position, which meant that the Japanese had to make their way up the slope, and not knowing the Chinese were there at all, they were given no smoke, or nothing was spotted for their artillery to fire on. Then when they crested the hill and they were at this point, they discovered that they were in minefields, and that's when the Chinese used reserve fire and short range with 2 12-group figures, 2 12-figure infantry companies, and 2 medium machine guns at short range, plus the mines themselves, almost annihilated those 2 companies. The 3rd company was attacked here, was met here by a suicide unit after again receiving reserve fire to weaken it down. The Chinese unit that took part in the annihilation of the Japanese infantry company here was then targeted by Japanese artillery, because it was anything they could see, and was wiped out. However, following morale throw, the Japanese morale cracked. They were down to 1 company plus their support weapons, so they bundled themselves back to their start line. So Sun Zhen's tactics, or the tactics I used for Sun Zhen in this game, worked on the Chinese right. Now let's have a look at the Chinese center. Now, the same again in the Chinese center. This position only had troops on the rear slopes and behind the hill. This made them invisible to the artillery observers. And let's remember that I gave the Chinese full air control for this game, so there were no Japanese reconnaissance aircraft to spot the hidden Chinese deployments. So when the Japanese battalion advanced forward here, again it met no resistance. This battalion sent 3 companies this way and 1 company this way. The company that came along this side, I'll just get my pointer. So the battalion attacked here, 1, 2, 3 companies, 4 companies. The company that got here was engaged by a different company of suicide troops, and again was put to the flight, and again those suicide troops were annihilated by Japanese machine gun fire and direct artillery fire. But it did secure the center. So slowly but surely Sun Zhen's plan was working, but it was costing a lot of men. The only Chinese support there was 2 81mm mortars, and for 6 turns, if the Chinese, after a D6, if the Chinese throw an even, they got 2 105 guns, and that happened a few times. The Japanese had 150mm guns off table, but again, because they were relying on observers and the Chinese were staying out of sight, the Japanese artillery wasn't really making much of an impression on this battle. So what the Japanese did, and as they would do in China, just remember I try to use the tactics that the army would have used. I ported the 275mm guns and sent them to the front to support the advance. This worked, but it only gave the Japanese 3 pieces of artillery, 275mm regimental guns, and a battalion gun as support. Now, the laying of this minefield was decided by dice. I tried the dice to get it there. I tried the dice to get it there. I tried the dice to get it here at one point, but eventually I diced for it there. So the Chinese player, as a Chinese player, I had started with this minefield here, and luckily I diced to get this one there too. But for the other one, that is where I got it. However, it was in a good enough place that when the Japanese eventually did stumble on it, as you can see by all the six-siders, casualties were heavy just from the mines. Then they were within short range of Chinese dug in on the rocks, and then they were counter-attacked by a suicide company. I had tried to get 2 out, but the dice failed me. So now we're looking at it's Japanese turn 9 has just ended, so it will be Chinese turn 9, and I'm not really going to go much forward with this game anymore because historically I feel I've done very well to replicate the Japanese advance and the Chinese style of fighting. Although I am the Chinese have seen off 2 infantry battalions. The battalion coming down the railroad is not going to make up the railroad in time because the game's 10 moves, so it would only have one more move, and the fastest anything could go is the tankette, which would be 30, which would be here. So the Japanese can't win. The Japanese could have belted ahead with the tankettes, but because they lost so many tankettes to suicide troops in the first battle, they were very wary about, not infantry and armor were worked hand in hand as they advanced up the railroad line. But the suicide troops still did get some tanks. This armored car was taken out by a 37mm infantry gun, and a 13.2mm Ochkis. So the game went nine turns. Look, if I went for 12, I'd definitely get the Japanese off table, but every game has to end. It was a very good game. I played it within a few hours. The Chinese tactics were because I tried to reflect what Zhen had done, ambush and fighting from towards the rear of the Japanese, and these tactics certainly worked. And I understand now fully how without air support it would have taken the Japanese 7 days, just over 7 days, to finally be outside of the town itself, the town and the station. So the next game will be one of those, and it'll be the final game in this campaign. And I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you press like and subscribe. Always more subscribers are welcome. And as I said, this campaign has shown us that the Sichuan Provincial Army, well, it was especially the 26th Army Group, would surprise everybody with how willing it was to fight, how professional that fight was, and how they had overcome their problems with drugs and discipline, and became a legendary army. And in the following fight, and in the next fight we're going to come, and at the end of the campaign, we'll do an update on what happened to all of these generals. But that's all for now. Press like and subscribe. See ya.